All right. In this episode of PM Playbooks, we sit down with Michael Giraldo, which is the Director of Operations at Black Sheep Global. We're going to explore how property management companies can transition from chaotic owner-dependent operations to scalable, process-driven machines. Michael shares his journey and the systems thinking philosophy that transforms business. Michael, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Well, I mean, first things first, you got some beautiful guitars on your quiver back there. So let's hear the origin story, where you live and how you got into doing what you're doing.
Yeah. I'm from Cali, Colombia, originally from New York. Been living here for almost 15 years. And I kind of fell into this by accident. I was working at a call center and here in Colombia, just like an easy job for a bilingual speaker to kind of find work. And a friend told me, hey, you can find remote work on Upworks. So I was like, I don't believe in that because my dad told me like only super intelligent people find remote work and work from home. But I put my ad online, just kind of started shopping around. And a company that was selling real estate in the Southeast picked me up for like social media or content managing. They found out I had a pretty good talent for working with systems. I've been playing with computers my entire life. And they're like, hey, we have Follow-Up Boss. Go and, see what you can do with it. You want to mess around with it? And so I started watching a lot of videos of how CRMs work and how to make things easier for the salespeople, how to automate some spreadsheets, how to set up like a call dialer that Follow-Up Boss had and set up automatic text messages when leads came in. And that just rolled in. I found another company that was doing a little bit of wholesaling in Utah. So I dipped in some sales experience. I don't like sales, but yeah, at that point I just needed to make bread.
Right.
And then I found a job working in SaaS for property management for the industry. They gave me a lot of opportunities to really grow and just kind of become a career-driven person. They took me under their wing. I was like extremely mentored, and then I kind of figured I could go on my own way, and here I am.
That's amazing. All right. So what's it like living in Colombia? For those of us who've never been, top three things we should all know about Colombia.
Yeah. So top three things is definitely travel with someone that knows the city. Just like any major cities, stay away from any neighborhoods that are unsavory. I think that's just true anywhere in the world. Definitely, the food in Cali is the best. I will fight anyone who says otherwise.
Okay. What's the dish of choice here in Cali?
We have what's it called? So Colombia itself kind of has the national dishes, and each city prepares it a little bit differently. It's kind of like there's a good emphasis on a lot of seasoning here, and I think that just adds a lot more flavor to it. But I would say bandeja paisa or sancocho de gallina, which is like a hen stew, probably like two of my favorite foods, and it's like a soup with they let the potatoes sweat a lot, so it gives it a little thickness. Mm-hmm. And we're very generous with our cilantro, and I think cilantro just fixes any dish up.
I love cilantro, yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Are you a hot spice guy too? Like, do you like putting like hot sauces in your food, or is that a common thing in Colombia?
I love hot sauce. I love all types of spicy food. It's not as common as I thought. When I first came here, I'm like, oh, Latin America. Everybody likes hot sauce, and I actually don't know that many people who like will use it generously. I have more friends in the States that had a lot of enjoy the hot sauce a lot more than people here. So
I always get joked at because if you open my refrigerator, it's like 90% condiments, and then there's like something of substance you can pour it on. So I mean, I will literally put hot sauce on lettuce. I don't care. So
I have like buffalo sauce, and I dip it on like a salad, and it just ups the flavor. Like there's
unlock. It's the unlock code for sure. Okay, so now you're over at Black Sheep Global. I mean, I almost feel like I got to ask you the origin story behind the name, like, because like my connotation of a black sheep is like the outcast of the family. So how'd you end up at Black Sheep, and do you know the origin story behind the name?
I do. So I hope I'll do the story justice. So Benjamin, the founder, he used to work at the SaaS company he used to work with, and apparently I wasn't part of this group, but there's a lot of PC things to pay attention to, and he had a group of friends where it wasn't anything dirty or anything like that, but it was just more like dark jokes or just darker tone jokes that they couldn't just use in public channels. So apparently they created their own group for like, some maybe spicy political stuff or again not so PC humor, and they called it Black Sheep. He eventually kind of sat down at a conference that they went to, and he was kind of chatting, and they had a conversation about how they should turn Black Sheep into a business. And Benjamin kind of ran with that. So it was called Black Sheep Global. He started kind of consulting on the side after he left, because he was their main project manager, and it ended up being a full-time business for him. Then I joined about like 6 to 8 months after he started it. It was supposed to be just a consulting firm. He needed someone who had experience with the software to pick things up quickly because he was about to have his fourth kid. And I joined him in July of 2023. And then in October, he had his fourth baby, Silas, and was able to go on paternity leave because I picked things up quickly. It was something I was already used to. Talking with clients I was not as comfortable with, but he leveled me up pretty quickly. And then he came back, and we started thinking about what if we replicate what we're doing as a kind of like project manager, implementer team, and kind of build a business out of it. So we always threw it back and forth a bit. And in New Year 2024, we're like, let's hire people. And we started bringing people on, figuring out the pain of what it's like to actually train what we do, and how much background experience actually went into that, and what it takes to actually grow a company. It's been a fun journey, but it's definitely like stepping into business shoes are a lot different than just being an employee.
For sure. And I've been kind of keeping up with some of the things that you say because I listen to you talking around the industry and whatnot, but you've often compared project management like being a torch juggler at a circus, trying not to drop a flaming torch while keeping the show going. Take us back to the beginning. What was the moment you realized you couldn't just juggle harder anymore? When did you decide to stop being a performer and start being a builder on stage?
It's a great question. So I think the biggest kind of transition for me was moving from someone who wants to do the client's bidding to someone who wants to help develop wins for a property manager. So as a project manager, initially it was about a client has a crazy or zany idea. I want to automate this, or I want to build this into my business. And it was, let's build it. Okay, what do we need? We need Zapier. We need this tool. We need Jotform, X, Y, Z, and we need to then duct tape it all together and it'll work. And it would, but more and more it was like, was this actually valuable for you? Was it, did it actually give you wins? Were you able to adopt it? Were we able to clearly track the success rate of it and how it actually changes your company? So as we got just better at understanding like the root behind a client's desire, it became more apparent that project management has more to do with keeping a team accountable, keeping them on track, than just kind of being having this factory of pumping automations and systems. So now I push back on my clients more. Sometimes I'm even a little mean. I've noticed I've had to kind of step a little bit back and be like, oh, I kind of told them that what they're doing doesn't work and they need to, and we need to think about it a different way. So now I'm working on tailoring my language so I'm not just rude. I don't think I'm rude, but
I would never designate you as rude, but that's me.
Yeah, but it's brings a lot more clarity to be in that position, and ultimately I think it develops trust. I think there's a big hidden value in what we offer, and it's accountability. A lot of people are used to kind of running their own ship without anyone kind of keeping them at bay, And I think a big thing that we've been able to provide is, hey, this needs to work properly, and your team needs to get on board with it, and we need to talk through that before we even think about how we systematize and do tech and do all the fun stuff.
It's a really good point. It's funny as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, like, when you're constantly kind of dealing with different types of personalities, like when you're in one company and you're dealing with a founder and they're a certain way, you get used to it and you kind of adapt what you're asked of and what you can actually deliver based on their personality and their willingness to do certain things. But when you take on the role that you have at Black Sheep and you're helping multiple companies implement technologies and processes and automate and move their business forward, you are a custodian of best practices too. And certain things work a certain way, but you're dealing with a lot of different personalities, like the visionary, the person who's the skeptic, and you have to let them be heard, but also guide them in the right direction. And I think what you just said is a great example of that. Is like sometimes, you also know that, in the role I'm in, I have a job I have to do and I got to get you there. And I can't spend weeks and weeks trying to placate you. And I got to get you there quick because you're paying me by the hour, or I have deliverables I got to meet. And it's a tough, role to play. And one of the things that you've also said that I've mentioned, kind of in conversation with some of my friends, because they're struggling with the same thing, is this idea of being like going through imposter syndrome. And you've been pretty open about wrestling with imposter syndrome, which is like that gap between feeling unqualified and being, a trusted advisor. Like you definitely have enough experience to tell people what they should and shouldn't do, or give them the feedback that they need. For the operators listening to this who are scaling their teams but secretly feel like they're faking it, how do you bridge that gap? Does the feeling ever go away from like feeling like an imposter, where like maybe you're not perfectly qualified for what you're doing? And how have you overcome that yourself?
I don't think the feeling ever goes away, and I think if it does, it may be time to find something something challenging, because it means you've maybe identified that you don't feel like there's nothing left to learn. Because I think imposter syndrome, in a negative light, it's I don't belong here, and eventually someone will find out, and I'll be kicked out, and they'll find out like I actually don't bring a lot to the table. But if you don't have it, or on the positive side is, there's a gap there and I can close it, or I can get closer to it. So I don't think it ever really goes away. As far as how to navigate it or still be able to perform, I guess there's a lot of opportunity in books that I've got recently. I've gotten myself into that, just having to read more and more to level up my ability to service our clients. And ultimately, I think the big thing is trying to, as you build more trust with people you think are ahead of you, you peel it back and they have the same questions they have at their level, right? Sina, I don't know, you've been a business owner and a driver of like a massive change across the industry for, a couple of decades now. That's a big number to work through. But if challenge ever went away, I think it would be like, I've got to go look elsewhere. So I think there's a lot of value in understanding that everyone's in the same place, just maybe at a different stage in their career, and that's a little bit exciting. And then on a practical level is, because I know that there's a lot of fun philosophical debate on just like the big ideas, but on a practical level is, take a deep breath. You're gonna say things that aren't crazy good ideas, and then you're also gonna say a lot of things that are really good ideas. And as long as you're kind of open and transparent about that, especially with who you're talking to, or who you're engaging with and your team, people are usually pretty receptive to give you grace. So I've had to come to my team. I've never led a team before, and last year I started leading one, and having to actually manage people and hold people accountable internally as a company. And I felt the best way to go is to be honest. I've never done this before. Help me lead you guys. Help me take charge. Tell me where Let's hang out and tell me what I can do to service you guys. And being that very servant mindset kind of gives you a lot of opportunity for people to be honest with you while having a lot of grace and lifting you up.
I think I love what you just said in that if you don't feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, you're maybe not learning anymore, because just that fear of not having all the answers is super healthy to keep us curious enough to go push ourselves and continually innovate. And I think that is a pretty good segue into, this idea of systems thinking. It's something that you've been pretty outspoken on. It's something that's the foundation of probably Black Sheep and many others who help adopt all the latest tech. I would argue to say we are in the most pivotal time for technology that I've seen since the cell phone and the digital camera and maybe the electric car. I mean, we're at a very, very interesting place. The adoption of AI, literally from week to week to month, it is getting scary how capable it is to do so many things. But I also see a lot of people really unsure of how to adopt it. But that being said, industry data shows AI adoption just in property management has tripled this year to about 58%. So that's just looking back at 2028. You've posted about using ChatGPT for personal goals, but operationally, is this the next big lever for property managers now, or is it hype cycle? Like, do you really think this is the button where, if it's software, it's just a magnifying glass, but what happens when companies rush into like AI, is it going to explode their ability to do things that they couldn't do before, or does it just accentuate broken promises?
So with AI, for like in my experience, I know that AI needs a lot of feedback and it needs a lot of information in order to function properly. And I think at the broad level, things like ChatGPT and Claude and all these tools that are out there right now, they have an enormous library of information because they're just accessing the internet. As a business, like your personal business, it doesn't have specific information for your business. It has information about your industry, and it can maybe spit out benchmarks of what you're doing or best practices on like a general view. But at the way that I see property managers wanting to leverage AI, specifically in like things like maintenance or having like AI bots kind of help them leverage labor that their team used to operate. They don't have good documentation in place, or they don't think about that, and so that's not at the top of mind. And just like with any software craze, if you don't have a good system to operate and to work through your day-to-day, create feedback systems with your staff, a whole bunch of different nuts and bolts of operating that, then your AI is going to be about as smart as you make it. So, right, it's like a kid. If you don't if you don't educate them, they're going to grow up and they're going to be kind of lost in the world. And I think AI just inherently is just going to get smarter, and it may end up doing the work for you. But it's the difference between you being super structured and then AI leveraging all that information that you've been able to provide it, or waiting 5 or 10 years, falling way behind the curve, and then getting to AI once everyone's already once it's matured a bit, right? Like the iPhone took about 7-8 years to really mature, and now changes are minimal. I think it's a very similar function with AI since the smartphone, since laptops came into play.
I was at a dinner at the systems conference where we saw each other. And we were sitting at the table, and someone asked me a really interesting question. They said, you've been in this industry for 30 years and you've kind of seen a lot of tech come and go. What do you think we'll be talking about next year at this conference? And I said, honestly, I believe the era of, personalized AI for your business and is in its infancy. But in conferences like this, instead of talking about, adopting software, we're going to be talking about people who are owning their own AI and feeding it, like you said, information from different places and giving it skills and capabilities to do things, whether that's in decision support or carrying out tasks or whatever. I think it's going to be less about like what software do you use. It's going to be more about how are you solving complex problems with your AI. And that term, your I think it's going to become more prevalent that people are going to kind of want to own their own AI and not just take something from anybody. In the era of software platforms and data repositories opening up so that AIs can access them is just getting started. There's probably a future at some point where we're not even building websites for humans anymore. We're building them for AI bots and agents that are reading them. But you make a really important point, which is like, if your information is sitting in chaos, putting AI on top of chaos just creates more chaos faster. And that's a pragmatic way of like really kind of justifying what is probably your mission statement, right? Which is to help people like create some order so that you can really scale, whether that's with humans or AI. You know, I'm sure you're seeing this on a day-to-day basis. Are you?
Yeah, definitely. As many clients as we kind of have been able to serve, you have favorites. There are people that are kind of, and they're all fantastic people. So when I use favorites, I would mean it more into how organized they've come to the table to have a conversation. So I've had the pleasure of working with people who are so well integrated into their systems, and I don't mean systems like technology. I mean like the way they operate the business, that it's been like, I don't even know how to call it. It's, sliding through butter, I guess. I don't know. But it's just very mechanical, and the engagement is just a lot more enjoyable because everyone knows what they have to do. Everyone has ownership of their respective responsibilities. We're able to output faster. And then I have companies who have never thought about something as simple as who does this work. It's just everybody. And so they play hot potato with who's up on deck to send a lease agreement or to do this maintenance task. And so those conversations, they're equally fruitful. I think it's kind of fun in its own way because I get to build trust and provide value in a very different way. But it does expose that there's a large spectrum of how businesses operate. And just like we have accidental landlords, I almost feel like there's an element of accidental property managers. People who jumped into the industry, they had money to invest, they got stuck with 12 properties from an owner, and then there's money to be made, and there's money to be made in spite of what you do. So you end up with companies that have 300, 500 doors that are just kind of figuring out that they could probably double their efficiency or triple it by putting even the base policies in place of, here's my team, here's a company structure I want to have, here's how I want to operate my meetings and have some effective outcomes. And we haven't even touched how technology improves it. It's just a mindset shift.
It's fascinating because there's definitely a burnout epidemic happening too. You said something that I was talking about. I was on a panel with a lot of members of the NARPM community, and in the conversations, I had to speak up and say, I really get tired of listening to podcasts or events where I go to where someone gets up on stage and says, nobody planned to become a property manager. And it's kind of like some kind of joke, but I don't find it funny as somebody who's been in this industry for 30 years and has clearly made it my career. I actually wanted to get into property management. It was a facet of a real estate strategy that my family office had been, in real estate for more than 50 years. And we had nobody who really kind of specialized in property management. And I saw an opportunity as you acquire real estate, but how you run it and manage it drives, great margins if you do it well. And I think the art of doing property management should be a coveted career. It's not one that we should just kind of say how did you end up here? It's not like that at all. But it's really alarming that 79% of property management professionals report mental health impacts, and there's about 34% turnover year over year of just property management staff. Some of us have been affected by it. Some of us have not. But I know it's important with Black Sheep's mission to make companies less owner dependent, how does reducing that dependence actually prevent burnout that you've seen? If operational clarity is the antidote, what's the first system a burned out operator should fix?
If we're talking internally, I would say they have to get a really fantastic number two. I think with most business owners, if pulling the curtain back a bit on not just property managers, but business owners, there's a lot of struggle with the idea that a business owner is kind of supposed to be good at everything, or because they built the business, they have to have their hand involved in every piece of the business. But most of the business owners I know, they're always, they're either tech happy or tech hungry, or they're, they have shiny object syndrome. And it's not just in things, but like this new idea or this new thing that we could do to make additional revenue, or this new service that we can give our clients and our customers. And
they're bored, is what you're saying. They're bored. They're looking for something else.
Yeah, they get bored really easily, and it's cool to have to be that person who has the means and the will, kind of the motivation to put that and enact that into the world and say, I want to build this and let's just go. But there's no brakes on that train, and I think a fantastic number two is a person who can kind of wall you out of that a bit. We're dealing with this right now internally. We've been primarily focused on Ben's the founder, and I am his number two. But we're dealing. It's like a founder led relationship where it's historically been that. It's the relationship dynamic can be a little bit difficult because he's my boss in a sense, in a big sense. He is my boss. But we're friends. But because he's my boss, or that's my mindset, it's been historically like, oh, I may not like an idea, or I don't think it will lead in the right direction, but ultimately, you hold the cards. So if you think it's an idea, I'll figure out how to make it work. And that means that ultimately Ben gets to kind of run around and do all these ideas, but he doesn't get to. It makes it really hard for him to, or the company itself, to execute the vision that it originally started, and to get that outcome. Where Ben wants a company that can function efficiently, that we're not working 40-hour weeks, that we get to enjoy time with family. Like, that's the intrinsic vision of why he started this business. I think it's the same with most business owners. I don't think they start a business to be property management professionals or to be business owners, but to leverage their professional life to develop personal lives within their company, build a healthy culture, or build a foundation for their kids. There's always that personal outcome. And if that can become the focus of what you want to do, a great number two that you can trust to tell you no, and that you can trust to be really focused on building a step-by-step plan of the vision that you want to build, someone that you highly trust, that's the first strong system that you can put in place. Because then that starts trickling down into, okay, how can that number two help get each department in place? How can that number two hold me accountable as the boss to what I really want to do, right? I don't really want to just own a business. I want this business to be something, to mean something for me, for my family, for the people that work for me, for the customers I want to service. Whatever that goal or anchor is, it gets lost in the weeds if you as the business owner are trying to build a business and work in it at the same time.
Yeah, there's no question that founders get bored of their core business after a while, and they, especially in property management, it's so easy to just it is very routine. And so you start looking at acquisitions, you start looking at ways to optimize things, and you get a little bit of the shiny penny syndrome that you spoke about. And
different
the challenge
markets.
with this, yeah, exactly. And it's like the shiny penny syndrome is really challenging when you don't have full control over like the day-to-day operations. And for me, I've been lucky to have started a couple companies with my co-founder here at Aptly, was also my co-founder of Propertyware. And, Adam is basically my yin or yang, whichever one, and we complement each other with very different skill sets. And I think that's really powerful with your number two sometimes too, because when you have basically a very similar profile who's your number two, there can be a little bit of collision of priorities of, who's supposed to set the vision, who's supposed to do A, B, and C. But when you have different skill sets, like an operator versus a visionary, or a technologist versus a visionary and go to market, it really helps because there's a sanity check that comes in with every decision where you're like, does this make sense? And also as a solopreneur, it sucks. It really sucks to be all on your own, making all the decisions by yourself. The highs are really high, but the lows are really low. And there's nobody who quite understands what you're feeling. And having a solid co-founder or a number two person that you've elevated into a leadership role definitely helps, kind of alleviate the pressure, but it also, with the empowerment that you talked about, allows you to kind of amplify yourself. I've actually been going through a similar trajectory as we kind of like close the conversation on AI. You mentioned like it's only as smart as whatever you give it. Again, going back to we'll be talking about our own AIs at some point. I've also found that, in the same way that you encourage people to document processes and basically do that so that you can run a more efficient business, I have found that if I can let my team learn how to use AI the way I use AI, we elevate ourselves to a whole nother level. Now, instead of asking them to humans are so accustomed to hitting a roadblock and then finding a way around it. We're fascinating species and accommodating for I guess shortcomings of something that has to get done, but AI is not. And so by giving, humans these tools and saying hey, let it do the routine stuff and you focus on when we have to adapt, that for me is the most profound use of what Black Sheep does and what Aptly does. It's we are essentially trying to train systems to get them to just run the analogy of the smooth like butter until you hit the toast. And then you got to figure out where you're going to go. And I think that's really important. Now, you've also mentioned discovering EOS. And I know some people know what that means, but that's the entrepreneurial operating system. It's super popular in property management because of the power of predictability. In property management, predictables can sound like a fantasy because you're dealing with people and their homes and maintenance issues. But what does a truly predictable operation look like to you? Is it about eliminating surprises, or is it just better about handling them when they come up?
I think surprises are hard to eliminate. It is definitely more towards handling them, but you do the EOS framework on on a level 10 issue, for example. When you're having
qualify, what is a level 10 issue for those of us who don't know what it is?
So in EOS, there's a one of the biggest levers that you can pull is to have structured meetings, and your meeting is set up in a certain way that it enables you to actually be productive. So you don't walk away and say this could have been solved in an email. And one of the elements of that is you have a section where you're kind of discussing the most important issues that would prevent you from hitting a target that you set for yourself for the quarter. So in the issues section, the philosophy is the issue that's in here must be resolved so that it never happens again. Or that's the mindset that you should go into when dialoguing an issue and then looking to solve it. So I think with that helps. There is an element of eliminating some friction between an issue that can arise. Some very basic issues is our lack of communication with tenants. It's a very common problem with property managers, or I would say more of a desire to improve. More frequently, I've done a lot of evictions processes where they want to keep the tenant involved because ultimately we want to get paid. We don't want to evict the tenant. We want the balance to be paid, and upping how much you reach out to them can improve that. How do we put that into the system? How do we make that effective? That's an issue that needs to be resolved, and that problem greatly diminishes. We become better at handling that. We become better at retaining revenue because the tenant pays. You bug somebody enough, they're eventually going to crack and just like take the payment. I need the house more than I need to just avoid the problem. It won't happen in every case, but that's where we start limiting issues. I think the true power of EOS is it solves the people issue. So with it solving the internal people issue that most companies operate with, it's a very cool concept in my opinion of every person has what they're accountable for. It's not just I have a property manager and I have a maintenance coordinator. Is what are they responsible for, in which if you didn't have this position and they didn't accomplish these responsibilities, the company couldn't function and couldn't hit something that the dream target that you wanted to hit in 10 years or the year or the quarter. And learning to hire for that for that seat. So I think behind all the structure that EOS builds, it is a people first system. You bring the right people that align with the right culture that you want to develop. All of a sudden, predictability is easy because you have the right people that know how to deal with it, and you have the right people with the mindset, and they want to follow you. So I think there's a kind of a paragraph in one of the EOS books, because there's a lot of them, and it's like each one of your team members is an arrow, and you want all the arrows to point in the right direction. And the biggest friction I see with property managers, or a lot of the property managers I work with, is you maybe have like 10 team members and 3 of them are walking in the same direction, and the other 7 are floundering, or they want to, but they don't know how because you haven't made it clear what the actual direction is. So how can you bring that? It's a top-down issue. And one of like a really good consultant, really good friend, we were kind of on a call at one point, and he said something that I love this quote. He says, your business looks like you, right? It's very emphasizing that it's probably your fault that your team isn't listening to you, because you either hired the wrong person, which means you don't have a good quality hiring process, or you haven't given them the tools or the direction that they need to be successful, and you're misplacing, or you're wasting talent that could be better served elsewhere if you would kind of focus. Which is, it's a harsh thing, but it was like a woof moment for me to hear that. So yeah.
I agree. I mean, there's a lot of parallels to probably everybody who's listening to this and looking at their own teams of places where you're like, I'm pretty sure if I spend more time with that person and gave them more concrete goals and directed them a little bit better, they would add more value. And it's true. It's 100% true. Looking at everything you've said, my takeaway on it is that, we're at a place in time where if I'm a leader and I'm stuck and I want to kind of like take the next step to evolve my business, what are 3 great foundational pieces of advice you would give that person? I mean, I'm hearing you say that I need a strong number 2. I'm hearing you also say that you need to, think about designing, processes. That doesn't necessarily have to mean tech. It can mean like people processes and goals and objectives and whatnot, but just, maybe I should go read a book on EOS. But what are 3 things that I can walk off of this call and be like, wow, those are things I definitely want to go check out?
Yeah. If you're not on any operating system, EOS is one of many tools. I would say research what an operating system for a business looks like. I think there's like Lean as well. There's the Rockefeller method. I think that's for like larger companies. And by larger, I mean like really large, like I think like 1,000+ employees. So it may be, it's a good learning piece, but it may not be for the type of industry that we service. But I would say you should look to put some structure, even if you do it yourself. If you have the capacity to pay for a consultant, I've seen it pay dividends on companies who really focus on that. The second thing is take it slow. I know there's this urgency of the business needs to transform in 3 to 6 months. That usually has its own pitfalls, and you usually end up building half-assed systems. And things aren't super clear because you don't have all the information on hand on like what it will take to work through that. One of the best clients I've worked for, it took them like 2.5 years to get through EOS, and and they are extremely organized. They are laser focused. But when I talked to him as, integrator to integrator, it's like 2 years ago, it was really hard to say no to the owner. It was really hard to, or his co-founder. His door was a revolving door of people who had like 1,000 questions. And nobody, it was, if they ask, if he's not available, they'll ask the next person, they'll ask the next person. There wasn't any true delineation of who's responsible for what. And I would have never guessed that, because when they came to work with us, they were black and white. They were super organized. And whenever I needed to talk through a specific process to help them design it, it was with the right person. I always had one person who knew exactly what the process needed to look like and who owned it. So definitely understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And the last thing is, this is a hard element to take a look at, but you're already doing these things. It's not like you're creating more work for you. You already know that your salesperson and your property manager go out and visit the properties. You already know that your maintenance person does the inspection. Like, all of this already happens. All you're doing is figuring out a good way to put this stuff on paper, and then put it into eventually systems that take some of that work away. But there's this friction of adoptability that gets built when we're thinking about like putting it into workflows, and then putting them into systems, and then the next level, which is getting AI involved. It's like, none of this is new work for you. You're just adding clarity to it, right? You're taking like a bunch of Legos, and then you're building a city with it, and you start with the floor, and then you work your way up. So think about it from the ground up. None of this is new. It's just you're organizing it, you're filing it, and that's boring. That's boring work.
It's an operator's work. It's going from like innovation to scalability, and I think that's, some people thrive in the world of like coming up with an idea and just being like so excited about just getting it going, and then it's like, now I got to actually run a business, and it's like, that's not so fun. You've, I guess, maybe a little plug for, Black Sheep and what you guys do. I know there's a lot of folks out there that do system implementations. What makes Black Sheep's approach unique? We have our Future Built conference. We bring all you guys in, and we get to learn a lot about you. Just from my 2 cents, I've been so impressed by you and Ben, and kind of like how thorough you guys are. Like, it's really interesting how different every single one of the solution providers in our network are. They just have such different approaches, and you all respect one another for your different philosophies. But what is it specifically that you guys do that sets you apart? And maybe anecdotally, maybe tell me a little bit about some of the tougher implementations that you've done, and how you've kind of made them work for folks.
Yeah, well, I would say kind of our big focus is we're very tech oriented, and we're not property managers. And so that can either be a boon or a disservice, depending on depending on the beholder. We believe that helps us kind of bring objectivity to the industry, right? We're not looking at it through your property management lens. We're looking at your business through a business lens, and all the components that need to operate. Because while you're servicing a unique service in the wide array of markets, you're ultimately a business that needs to function exactly like every other business, right? There needs to be structure. There needs to be departments. There needs to be a good flow of ideas and a feedback loop in place for the business. So I'd say that's one of the biggest elements. The other one is we're very ground up kind of business. So we want to make sure everything is done on paper first. And then we want to go ahead and build into your system. And I think accountability is the big element of that. We want to train your staff to be able to be effective in whatever it is that we're doing. So if you want to build an operator, we can work with that. If we're doing all the building, we're happy to do so, but your team's going to have to be on those calls, and we're going to make an effort to make sure that takes place, because the owner has one way of looking at a system, and then we talk to their operator who's actually doing all the hard work, of that renewal process of that evictions actually going to court. Like, no, we do so much more than that. We need that person on the call because they know what that department runs like, and they should, because you're the owner. You're not supposed to be, intimately involved with every single piece of the business. Otherwise, you'd go crazy, and you wouldn't do the things you actually like doing, like talking to owners or selling or build or marketing, whatever it is that you're passionate about.
Tell me a little bit about like maybe a more complicated implementation that you were involved with, and what you learned from it and what people can learn from it was your experience.
Yeah, I'd say one of the more complicated implementations is something we're going through right now. They're a little bit in that what's it called? I don't want to be ageist, but they're an older group of older team.
It's okay. So, I got my AARP card over here. So.
It's systems is definitely a challenge when it usually when depending on like the demographic. So it's been eye-opening of how much more simpler we can become, and how many less assumptions we have to make when we're working with a team. I work with systems day in and day out, so I'll say Zapier and paths and custom fields and all this funny foreign language that doesn't make sense to people, but I forget that doesn't make sense to other people. So it's been fun, like peeling that back, and it happens in waves. I've had clients that aren't as tech adverse. This is probably like we're working now with like some of the clients that are very resistant to technology, but they know they need it. So there's another level of simpleness and value add that I have to grow into be able to deliver that. And so it goes from click on that tool to, on the left hand side there's a dashboard, there's this menu bar, you have the settings. So all these little nuances of having zero assumptions about how much the client will and won't take. And it's been rewarding because you can tell they appreciate it, or at least I feel they appreciate it. And I know I'll have to ask them about it.
30 years, man. I know exactly what it's like for people to hate any kind of change in technology in this industry. It's tough. But you made a really good point, which is like they know they need it. And I think we're embarking on a future, maybe, just maybe, where there'll be less buttons to click and we can use chat interfaces and voice to do those things. And I'm optimistic that, us on the software side will stop designing forms and clicks and settings and kind of design it more for AI to take interpretation at heart. So hopefully we're going to make easier to navigate systems in the future. Michael, it's been amazing talking to you. And I will say that, from a standpoint of your explanation of chaos to order, there's a lot of people who probably are still very interested in kind of adopting what you're saying. What's the best way to reach out to Black Sheep if they wanted to?
Yeah. So you can reach out to me or Ben. They're on LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn, so you can reach out to us on LinkedIn or Facebook. You can also go to blacksheepglobal.net if you want to take a look a little bit at what we do. There's a lot of client feedback that we've had over the years. If you want to take a look at how each client is different, there's a different pain point that we've serviced. So there's a lot of content there on how we've worked with small companies, mid-sized companies, solved different types of issues, gotten to roots of stuff that weren't expected until we actually dove into their processes and into their team. But yeah, and if you want to book a call, Ben's the guy to talk to. He's a fantastic question asker. He trains us on how to ask questions constantly because he's worked in customer service for over a decade. So even if you're not interested in our tech or what we do, talk to Ben. He's a fantastic person, and he'll definitely give you some good advice at whatever it is you want to kind of talk to him about.
I would echo that. And I also think you guys are unique in the sense that you take small cohorts of companies that you work with. You don't scale to 1 million type of business. You work with a small group of people and make sure that you have the bandwidth and the capacity to get them to their goals. So I think that's really unique as well.
Yeah.
All right, Michael. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you out on the road, and I'm sure everyone else will too.
yeah, excited to hang out throughout the year.
All right, take care.
Bye.